When my son told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas, I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't even ask why. I stood up from his dining table, smoothed the wrinkles from my cardigan and said, "Of course." My voice surprised me. It was calm, flat, like the voice of someone who had already made peace with the worst. "Mom, don't make this harder," he said, eyes flicking toward his wife, Mara. She stood by the sink, arms folded, watching me like I was a problem to be solved, a stain on her white kitchen tile. "I'm not making anything harder," I replied. "I'm leaving." I reached for my coat. The house smelled like cinnamon and new money, the kind of scent you buy when you want to pretend everything is perfect. On the fridge were my grandchildren's drawings, a snowman with too many buttons, a tree with a purple star, my name, Nana, written in thick, proud letters. I swallowed. The air sharpened. "Mom," my son, Ethan, said quietly now, "we just need space. You make things about you." I watched his lips form the words. I remembered those same lips as a baby, always hungry, always searching for me. I'd had nothing but stale crackers and cheap milk some nights. But he never knew that. He never knew because I made sure he didn't. "Space," I repeated, as if the word were something expensive I couldn't afford. Mara stepped in. "It's healthier for the kids." "Boundaries. We talked to our therapist. I could have laughed. Instead, I put on my coat. "Boundaries," I said. "Of course." Ethan reached for the doorknob, eager, almost relieved. His fingertips trembled, then steadied. "We'll call you after the holidays," he said. "Maybe we can reevaluate." "After the holidays," I said. "Of course." Outside, December had teeth. The sky was a heavy grey blanket, the clouds already chewing on snow. I got into my aging Toyota, the one whose heater moaned before it warmed. I sat, hands on the steering wheel, eyes on nothing, breath fogging the glass, and I felt the first tear loosen from the corner of my eye. I let it fall, just one. Then I wiped my face, straightened my shoulders and pulled out my old phone. The case was cracked, the screen spidered, one call. I knew exactly whom to dial. "Linda?" My voice was steady again. "It's me." A pause, then warmth. "Sweetheart, I'm here, I think," I said. "I think we're going to do it." Silence bloomed on the line, then a hush of recognition. "You're sure?" "He told me I'm not welcome for Christmas," I said. "He said I make everything about myself." "I think that's enough to be sure." Linda exhaled. "Then we'll follow the plan. No rush, no noise, paper first, keys later." A snowflake smacked the windshield and melted like a small surrender. "Paper first." I repeated. We had made that plan a year ago, over tea that went cold while we whispered. Linda had been my friend since nursing school. She'd seen my marriage collapse. She'd seen me put my son through college by taking double shifts, triple shifts, every shift they offered. She'd also seen me sign papers, quiet papers, when I bought the little rental duplex down on Morse Avenue with the inheritance my mother left me. Papers my son never asked about because he never thought to. Papers that made me owner on titles, co-signer on loans, trustee on accounts with names he'd recognize and names he wouldn't. "Are you alone?" Linda asked. "Yes." "Then drive home. Put the kettle on. I'll bring the folder I turned the key." The engine groaned, then caught. I drove. The neighborhood lights were coming on, warm squares floating in the dusky blue. I imagined Ethan and Mara going back to their candles and their reclaimed wood table. I imagined the way Mara would let her hand touch his wrist, a signal, a reward. "You did the hard thing, baby. You set a boundary." I smiled. It tasted like steel. At home, the house greeted me the way old houses do, with a sigh and a memory. The coat rack wobbled. The floorboard, third from the front door, complained about my weight. I set the kettle on, placed 2 chipped mugs on the counter, and pulled the box from the highest shelf of the pantry. A plain shoebox with a rubber band around it. Inside, keys, receipts, a bundle of old letters, the copy of a trust document with a sticky note in Linda's careful hand. "Remember, you hold the pen." When the doorbell rang, I didn't flinch. I let Linda in. She shook off snow, pulled her scarf free, and wrapped me in her solid, no-nonsense hug. "You look like a lighthouse," she said. "Wrecked ships don't scare me." "I'm tired," I whispered into her coat. "You should be," she said. 40 years of storms will do that." We sat at my kitchen table. She slid the folder toward me. "Here's what we prepared. We'll review, slowly, and then you'll sleep. Tomorrow we start." I lifted the cover. Tabs with labels: Morse Avenue Duplex, Lakeview Storage Education Trust, Emergency Fund, Power of Appointment, Contingencies. Linda's hand hovered over each one like a priest blessing a congregation. I traced the words with my finger. "Do you think I'm cruel? I think you're awake." She said, "There's a difference." We began. "Morse Avenue," Linda said, tapping the first tab. "You own it outright since your mother's inheritance. Tenants are stable, but—" She flipped to the second page. "Your son leased the garage unit 3 months ago. He's been using it as a workshop. He's behind by 2 months. I blinked. "He never told me." "He didn't have to," she said. "He assumed you wouldn't check." "You told me you didn't want to embarrass him." I looked at the ceiling. The paint needed a fresh coat. "I didn't want to embarrass him," I said, and felt the ache settle. I wanted him to feel proud. "Good. Mothers give chances," Linda said. "Wiser mothers give deadlines." She slid a paper forward. "Notice of default. Not today. Not this minute. But soon, next tab. Education Trust." I swallowed. "For the kids?" I said. "You are the grantor and trustee." Linda said. "Distributions are discretionary." "Your discretion. My discretion." I repeated. I thought of purple stars on construction paper, of small hands reaching for ornaments. Mara's smile, sharp and empty. "They'll be okay. I'll see to that. But I won't fund the performance of a perfect family if I'm the cost of the ticket." Linda nodded. "Then we tie distributions to transparency. To time. To respect, we moved to Lakeview Storage, a quiet unit rented in my name where I had placed boxes over the years, documents, keepsakes, proof, phone records that showed who called whom when my ex-husband disappeared for 3 days that one winter and came back smelling like perfume I never wore, statements showing the transfer of funds I made to help Ethan with his down payment, money he told everyone had come from his bonus, screenshots of text messages from Mara asking me, politely and strategically, not to drop by without notice because it dysregulates the kids. A phrase she must have lifted from therapy notes. "You have everything," Linda said. "I have what they made me keep," I answered. "Evidence isn't something you collect when you're loved. It's what you collect when you're disbelieved." The kettle shrieked. We poured the tea. Steam rose like a prayer. "Last tab," Linda said. "Power of appointment." My breath came slow now. This was the one that had felt like armor the day we created it. I had set up a family trust with my mother's inheritance to pass down the assets in a way that protected my grandchildren. But I also kept a power for myself, the right to redirect those assets to other beneficiaries if certain conditions weren't met. "Conditions," Linda said, reading my mind. "You wrote them." Not me, I recited them. Honesty, presence, mutual care, no derision in front of the children, shared holidays. I laughed then, softly and without joy. Shared holidays. Linda placed her hand on mine. He thinks you are a lifeboat he can push away and call back when the waves get high. She said, but boats are made of wood. So is fire. I looked at the clock. The house hummed softly around us. Tomorrow, I said. Paper first. Keys later. Paper first. She repeated, and rose. I'll come by at 9. After she left, I stood in the quiet kitchen and pressed my forehead to the cool window. Snow fell heavier now, a hush covering the street. Somewhere, a wind chime spoke to the cold. I could imagine Ethan tucking the children into bed, telling them stories about Santa and surprises. Maybe Mara would pour herself a glass of wine and send a text to a friend. We finally set boundaries with his mom. It's healthier. Maybe Ethan would look out the window and wonder if I'd cry. He always hated when I cried. I didn't cry. I gathered the folder, the shoebox, my heavy old pen. I laid them on the dining table. I opened the window an inch, letting winter's breath into the room, a sharp reminder. Then I sat, pulled a legal pad close, and began to write. I wrote a list of what I owned, what I controlled, what I could decide. It took a while, longer than I expected. Ownership is invisible when you live your life giving things away. As my pen moved, a different thought started to glow at the edge of my mind, something I had noticed in the kitchen earlier, on the fridge. I closed my eyes and saw it, the children's drawing of a tree. And tucked behind it, half hidden by a magnet, a white envelope addressed to Ethan with the logo of Morse Avenue, holdings in the corner. He hadn't expected me to see it. But I did. I smiled, and this time it tasted like beginning. I whispered into the empty house, "You want space?" "Let me show you what space really is." I put the pen down. I looked at the folder tabs, neat as marching orders. It wasn't rage pulsing in my veins anymore. It was clarity, a mother's clarity, the kind that doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. Tomorrow, the real work would start. With paper, with patience, with the steady turning of a lock only I knew existed. I blew out the candles, left one lamp on for the night, and went to bed with the plan softening like snowfall in my chest. I dreamed of doors and of keys. Morning came blue and brittle. I woke before the alarm, sat up, and listened to the house to be sure it was still mine. It was. The radiator clanked like an old friend clearing his throat. A bird tried the first notes of a song and gave up. I swung my feet to the floor and found my slippers by memory. In the bathroom mirror, a woman looked back at me with a mouth that knew how to keep secrets. I braided my hair. I wore my good sweater, the navy one with the soft elbows, and the locket my mother gave me when Ethan was born. Inside was a photo of a newborn face squished in indignation. I touched the locket. "You were worth it," I told the photo. "You always were." At 9 sharp, Linda arrived with coffee and a notary stamp. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," I said. We spread the documents across the table like a map. There was no rush in our movements. We had rehearsed this. Mercy can be urgent. Justice should be precise. "First," Linda said, tapping the Education Trust binder. "Amendment to Trustee Guidelines." She slid a page to me. The language was clean, unapologetic. Distributions for school fees, camps, and accounts remained authorized. But discretionary extras, private lessons, travel programs, the fancy enrichment summers, would now require proof of regular visitation and inclusion. Nana wouldn't be a ghost that pays the bills. She would be a presence, or the extras would stop. I initialed, signed, dated. The notary stamp clicked like a gavel. "Second," Linda said. "Notice to tenant, garage unit, Morse Avenue." She looked up. "We'll give him 7 days to cure, 14 to vacate if he doesn't. You can waive fees if you choose after he responds. But we file now. I thought of Ethan's hands, always clever with tools, always impatient with instructions. I thought of him tinkering in that cold garage, telling himself he was building something. We file, I said. He can respond like any other tenant. Linda didn't smile. This was not a smiling day. Third, she said, trust restatement. Power of appointment clarified. You retain authority to redirect assets if you are ostracized, demeaned, or excluded from significant family traditions without cause. Without cause? I repeated. The phrase was a shield. He will say the cause is me. He can say anything he likes. Linda replied. Words are weather. Paper is climate, I signed. The pen felt heavier after each stroke, like it was absorbing some of the years I'd spent holding my breath. Fourth, she said. Beneficiary letter. This one is for later, if needed. She slid over a sealed envelope addressed to Ethan and Mara. It explains the changes in simple language. It lists what you have contributed over the years, dates, amounts, receipts. It names your boundaries. It does not beg. I will try not to open it too soon, I said. You will know when, she said. Mothers always do. We finished the stack by mid-morning. I made eggs. We ate them in silence at the counter. When we were done, Linda washed the plates like she always does, humming a hymn neither of us believe in anymore. The doorbell rang again. I frowned. Linda raised an eyebrow. Expecting someone? I shook my head and opened the door. Mara stood there, lips glossy, coat expensive, eyes cautious. Hi, she said too brightly. I was nearby. I stepped back. Come in. She did not remove her shoes. I can only stay a minute, she said. Well, last night was hard. We know it was hard for you. I wanted to... Check in. Linda appeared at my shoulder, dried her hands, and set the towel neatly on the back of a chair. She nodded once at Mara, and then at me. I'll be in the study, she said, and left us alone in the kitchen. Mara glanced at the table, where the edges of legal folders still showed. Her gaze sharpened, curious. Working on something? Just tidying up, I said. What brings you by? She sighed, touched the bridge of her nose. Ethan didn't sleep, she said. He feels awful. But we stand by the decision. It's healthier for the kids. The kids. I repeated. Yes. And for you, she added, as if she were handing me a gift. You won't feel pressure, expectations. You know, of course, I said. We all benefit. Her smile brightened. Exactly. There was a beat of silence. Mara looked around my kitchen like it was a set she was appraising. I know it's awkward, she said, but we wondered if you'd still be able to send the tuition transfer this Friday. Luca's winter camp, the robotics one. He's excited, and the program holds spots only if payment clears. I let the words hang in the air. They dangled between us, obvious and greedy. This Friday, I said. Yes, she said. Same account as usual. I poured us both water. I can do that, I said, but I'll need a copy of the camp schedule and the parental participation form. She blinked. Why? Because I want to attend the final showcase, I said. Boundaries are healthy. So is presence. Ah, she said. A micro-flinch. We'll see. It's a crowded event. The kids prefer consistency, I said. I'll see them there. Mara's smile froze, then reassembled. We'll send the form, she said. Thank you. She stood. One more thing, she added, too casually. Do you still have the spare key to our garage? Ethan misplaced his to your garage, I said, tasting the shape of the lie she thought she could feed me. No, I don't. She nodded, face smooth. No worries. She left without hugging me. I closed the door. Linda reappeared, like a conjured truth. She came for money, Linda said. And a key, I replied. We looked at each other. The same thought crossed both our minds. Mara didn't know the garage was my unit. She thought I was only a mother with a checkbook, not a landlord with a ledger. Timing, Linda said. She expected you to beg for Christmas, then she'd get the transfer. Then the key. Paper first, I said. Keys later. I gathered the documents and placed them back in the folder. Then I pulled out a sheet of letterhead from the drawer, Morse Avenue, Holdings, and typed the notice with a steady hand. I set it aside to cool like a pie windowed by winter. By noon, we were in Linda's car, headed to the bank. I wore my calm like a coat. At the branch, the manager knew me. I had opened accounts there the year Ethan left for college. We notarized what needed notarizing, updated beneficiaries, added a layer of passwords that didn't spell grandchildren's birthdays. I listened to the way the manager said my name. Respectful now that he saw the numbers on the page, it felt petty to enjoy it. I enjoyed it anyway. Outside the bank, a text from Ethan. Mum, I heard Mara stopped by. Thanks for understanding last night. It's for the best. Love you. Then another, seconds later, as if the first needed a shadow. Also, quick thing. Did you ever find the garage key? I typed and deleted 3 answers. I sent none. I put the phone away. Hungry? Linda asked. Starving, I said, and meant it. We ate soup at a diner that felt like a pocket of the past. I watched a man in a booth trace a finger around his coffee cup like he was drawing a circle he wanted to live in. Linda touched my wrist. You're doing this well, she said. I feel like a traitor, I confessed. To him. To the story of us. You're not betraying him, she said. You're betraying the lie that you have to disappear for him to be happy. On the way home, the snow paused. The sky lightened to a dull pearl. I stopped by the storage unit. The attendant smiled at me and handed over the clipboard with his chapped hands. In the cool, dim space between rows of metal doors, I slid my key into Unit 14B and pulled up the blue door. The scent of cardboard and time rose like a memory of basements. I gathered the folders we would need later. Tuition receipts, down payment wires, text printouts, holiday photos where I'm present in every room and somehow missing from every story. As I turned to go, something glinted on the concrete near the threshold. A small key, old style, brass. Not mine. I picked it up. It had been stepped on, bent slightly. I pocketed it without thinking. Keys have a way of finding me these days. Back home, Linda hugged me at the curb. We've done enough for one day, she said. Let the paper settle. Tomorrow we deliver the notice. Tomorrow, I said. I went inside. I made tea again. I sat at the table and let the quiet lay its cool hand on my neck. My phone buzzed on the wood. A new text. This one from an unknown number. Hi, you don't know me. I'm the tenant next door to your son's garage. I think you should see something he left outside. A picture followed. A crate. Spray painted with the words, Holiday Project, Do Not Touch. The lid was slightly ajar, revealing something wrapped in glitter paper and twine. And beneath the crate, the angle of the photo caught a black binder. The label read, Materials, Q4. I stared at it for a long time. I felt that small brass key warming in my pocket like an omen. I typed back slowly. Thank you. Where can I find you? The reply was immediate. Morse Avenue Garage 3. I'm here for the next hour. I stood. I put on my boots. I took my folder and my pen and slipped the brass key into my locket chain for safekeeping. On my way out, I paused at the mantel. I looked at the frames there, Ethan at 5, Ethan at 12, Ethan in a cap and gown, Ethan holding his first child, looking like a man who believed mirrors. I love you, I said to all the versions of him. And I won't be erased. I locked the door behind me. The street had gone quiet again, the kind of quiet that comes before a change in weather. I headed for Morse Avenue. People think betrayal begins with harsh words or slammed doors. But betrayal begins much earlier. It begins with memories, with the weight of what you gave and what they forgot. When Ethan told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas, my mind didn't just hear his words. It traveled back, through decades, to nights of hunger, to mornings of exhaustion, to years where I wore shoes with holes so he could wear shoes with laces that glowed white and new. I was 23 when I had Ethan, barely out of nursing school, barely able to pay rent. His father, Robert, was a man of dreams, dreams too large to ever stay in the same room. When I told him I was pregnant, he kissed my forehead and said, "We'll make it work." But work to Robert meant running after schemes, gambling on projects, disappearing for weekends that turned into weeks. I remember the first time I realized it was only me and Ethan against the world. Ethan was 6 months old. The fridge was empty. Robert was gone. Chasing another opportunity, I sat on the kitchen floor, Ethan in my lap, and whispered, "I'll never let you starve." That night, I walked to the hospital 2 neighborhoods away and begged the head nurse for any shift, any hours, any work. She looked at my tired eyes and nodded. "Night shift starts at 11. Can you do it?" I said yes. For years, my life was measured in shifts, double shifts, sometimes triple. I learned to sleep in 20-minute scraps. I learned to eat in hallways between patient rooms. Every paycheck went to Ethan. Formula, clothes, daycare. And when there was nothing left for me, I told myself it didn't matter. Because he smiled. Because he grew. Because his little hands reached for me like I was his whole world. I missed parties. I missed weddings. I missed friendships that withered because I always said, "I can't." I have a shift, but I never missed Ethan's needs. When he wanted a science kit, I found a way. When he wanted to play soccer, I paid the league fees, even if it meant selling my mother's earrings. When he was 10, he wanted a bike. A real one. All the kids in the neighborhood had them. I didn't have the money, not then. I remember crying in the supply closet at work, thinking of his disappointed face. One of the older nurses, Joan, slipped me $50. "Don't pay me back," she said. "Pay it forward." That weekend, I brought home a shiny blue bike with training wheels. Ethan's eyes widened. "For me?" he gasped. "For you," I whispered. He rode that bike up and down the cracked pavement until the tires were bald. And when he fell, scraped his knee, and looked up at me with tears, I kissed his forehead and said, "You're brave. High school was harder. Teenagers are cruel without meaning to be." Ethan grew embarrassed of our small apartment, of my old car, of the way I wore thrift store scrubs. He wanted Nike. He wanted Abercrombie. He wanted what his friends had. I picked up extra shifts. I pretended I loved overtime. I told him his father sent money, though he hadn't. I hid the truth, that it was me. Always me. By the time Ethan reached college, I had nothing saved for myself. Every cent went to his tuition, his books, his housing. I took out loans in my name. "You're the best, Mum," he said once, hugging me quick before rushing off to his dorm. "I'll pay you back someday." I believed him. Then came Mara. She was polished where I was tired, confident where I was quiet. She saw Ethan not as the boy I raised, but as the man he could become. And for a while I was grateful. She made him laugh. She gave him ambition. She gave him the image of stability he thought he wanted. But slowly I began to see the cracks. The way she wrinkled her nose when I visited their first apartment. The way she corrected me when I offered advice about the babies. "We're doing things differently," she'd say, voice sweet, eyes sharp. I told myself it didn't matter. They were happy. That was enough. But every holiday became tighter. Every phone call shorter. My role shrank. I became the wallet, the babysitter, the background. Still, I gave. I gave when they needed the down payment for their house. I gave when Mara wanted to renovate the kitchen. I gave when Ethan lost his job for 6 months and told everyone he was consulting. I gave, because that's what mothers do. But the cruelest part of betrayal isn't the giving. It's when the giving is erased, when all those nights, all those shifts, all those sacrifices are wiped clean and you're told you are too much, that you don't belong. So when Ethan said I wasn't welcome for Christmas, what he really said was, forget what you did. Forget who you were. Forget that I once belonged to you. And that I could never forgive. I sat at my kitchen table that night, staring at the old photo albums. Ethan in his Halloween costume, Ethan blowing out candles, Ethan holding a trophy. My handwriting on every page. Ethan's first tooth. Ethan's science fair. Ethan's graduation. Proof that I was there. Proof that I gave. Proof that I mattered. I touched one photo, the two of us at the zoo, his little hand clutching mine. I felt my throat tighten. I kept my promise. I whispered. I never let you starve. But now, you want me to disappear. The tea had gone cold. The house was silent. And in that silence, a thought bloomed. Not anger, not rage, clarity. I realized I had one final gift to give him, the gift of truth, the truth of what happens when you forget where you came from, because he thought he could erase me. But he forgot. I kept everything, the papers, the receipts, the proof. And now I would use it, not to beg, not to plead, but to remind him, with the force of everything I ever gave, that no son can bury a mother who refuses to be silent. That was the night my sacrifices turned into weapons, and my love turned into resolve. I closed the photo album, I blew out the candle, and I whispered into the empty room, paper first. Keys later tomorrow, the reckoning would begin. Sacrifice is a strange thing. When you make it, it feels like love. But years later, when no one remembers, it feels like a wound that never healed. I carried those wounds quietly. After Ethan married Mara, I thought my place in his life was secure. I told myself, I have raised a good man. He will never forget me. The first test came on their first Christmas together. Mara's family hosted. They had a big house in the suburbs with white lights on the roof and a tree so tall it almost brushed the ceiling. When I walked in, holding a carefully wrapped present, Mara's mother gave me a smile that was too polite to be kind. Oh, she said, you must be Ethan's mum. We've heard so much, I heard the unspoken words. The nurse with second-hand shoes, the single mother who scraped by. Dinner was perfect, too perfect. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, courses served in order. I watched Ethan laugh with his new in-laws, watched him fit into their polished world like he had been born there. When I reached to refill his glass, he shook his head. I've got it, Mum, he said, a little too sharp. It was small. Maybe no one else noticed. But I did. That was the first time I felt it, the shift, the quiet push, moving me to the edges of his new life. The years went on. Birthdays, holidays, milestones. I was always there, always giving. But the tone of my welcome changed. Maybe you don't need to bring so much food, Mom. We've got catering. Could you text before you visit? The kids have a schedule. Mum, don't tell that story again. It embarrasses me. Each word was like a paper cut, small but accumulating, and I bled inside where no one could see. I kept giving anyway, because that's what mothers do. One night, Ethan called. His voice was strained. Mom, can you help us out? Just for a little while. Mara's hours got cut, and I'm between jobs. How much do you need? I asked, already reaching for my checkbook. He sighed, relieved. 5,000. Just until we catch up, I gave him 7, because I knew catching up takes longer than people admit. Later, I found out he told Mara's parents the money came from a freelance contract. He couldn't even give me the dignity of honesty. Another time, when their eldest, Luca, started school, I offered to cover tuition. Mara smiled, grateful but careful. "That's very generous," she said. "We'll tell him it's from both sides of the family." "Both sides, always both sides, never just me." I agreed, but inside something cracked. I wanted my grandson to know I was behind him, not as a shadow, but as a light. Instead, my love became invisible currency, useful, but never acknowledged. Still, I stayed silent. I told myself I didn't need recognition. I told myself love was enough. But the silence grew heavy. Once, when I visited unannounced, Luca ran into my arms, squealing, "Nana!" I hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of crayons and cookies. But then Mara appeared, arms crossed. "Mom, please." "We've talked about boundaries. You can't just drop." By her voice was firm. Her smile was thin. "And Ethan?" He stood behind her, silent, eyes on the floor. I left that day with a box of cookies untouched in my hands. I drove home crying, the kind of tears that sting because they're mixed with shame. And then came the lie that broke me. At a family barbecue, surrounded by neighbors, Mara laughed and said, "We're so lucky. Ethan's bonus covered the down payment for our house. Otherwise, we'd still be renting." Everyone clapped. Everyone praised his hard work. Ethan smiled, modest but proud. I stood there, hamburger bun in my hand, frozen. Because it wasn't his bonus, it was my inheritance, my mother's legacy. The money I had quietly wired to his account when he told me he needed help with paperwork. He looked at me across the lawn. Our eyes met, and I saw it, the flicker of guilt. But he didn't speak. He let the lie live. That night I sat at home, staring at my bank statement. The numbers were smaller now. The silence was louder. I realized he wasn't just forgetting me. He was rewriting me, erasing me from his story. But the cruelest wound of all came from his own lips, years later, when he said, "You make everything about yourself. Stay away this Christmas. All the sacrifices, all the nights, all the loans, all the meals skipped so he could eat, flattened into that single sentence. Stay away." I thought of my mother then, a strong woman with hands calloused from factory work, who told me once, "Sacrifice makes sense only when it's remembered. Otherwise, it's just theft from your soul." I hadn't understood then. I do now. Because all these years I thought I was building love, but maybe I was only building a debt Ethan never planned to repay. That was when I knew. The story of me, the real story, would not be erased. I would make him remember, not with pleas, not with begging, but with truth, with consequences. Because love without respect is just chains. And I was done being bound. That night I took out my shoebox again. The papers, the receipts, the proof. I laid them out like puzzle pieces. My sacrifices weren't invisible. They were documented, signed, dated. And soon they would speak louder than Ethan's words. I whispered to the silence, "You will remember me, even if I have to carve it into stone," and in that whisper, my plan was born. Some betrayals come like storms, loud, violent, impossible to miss. Others come like frost, slow, quiet, creeping into the cracks until everything you once trusted is frozen solid. For me, it was both. It began one evening in early December. I had baked cookies, my famous ginger snaps. I thought, maybe if I bring them over, maybe if I show up with something sweet, the coldness will melt just a little. I rang the bell. Luca's small face pressed against the window, his eyes lit up. "Nana!" he shouted. He ran to the door, fumbling with the handle, but Mara got there first. She opened. The door only halfway. The smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you didn't text. I just wanted to drop these off," I said, holding up the tin. "For the kids." Behind her, Luca bounced on his toes. "Can Nana come in?" he pleaded. Mara's hand rested on the door, firm. "Not tonight, honey." "Nana has to go." The words stung. I bent down, handed the cookies through the gap. "Here you go, sweetheart," I whispered. He grabbed them, grinning, before Mara took the tin from his hands like it was evidence in a trial. "Thanks," she said briskly, and closed the door. The click of the lock echoed in my chest like a hammer. I thought that was the worst, but the worst hadn't come yet. It came a week later. Ethan invited me to dinner. "We should talk," he said on the phone. His tone was measured, rehearsed. I dressed carefully, pressed blouse, neat slacks, the pearl earrings I wore only on important days. I wanted to look respectable, worthy. At the table, the food was exquisite. Mara had lit candles, set the plates just so. The children ate in the other room, their laughter muffled. For a moment, I thought, maybe this is reconciliation. Then Ethan put down his fork, cleared his throat, and spoke the words that still ring in my ears. "Mum, we don't want you at Christmas this year." The fork slipped from my hand. "What?" He didn't look at me. He stared at his plate. It's better this way. You make things about yourself. The kids pick up on your tension. Mara and I agreed. We need space." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mara reached for his hand, nodding, as if she were his courage. "I make things about myself?" I finally whispered. "You do," Mara said smoothly, stepping into the silence. "You don't mean to, but it happens. The stories, the advice, the way you hover. It's not healthy, not healthy." That phrase hit harder than any slap. I looked at Ethan, my son, my boy, the one I fed when I had nothing, the one I clothed when I had holes in my own shoes. His jaw was tight, his eyes were cold. "Just this year," he added quickly. "We'll reevaluate after the holidays." I felt my chest tighten, breath shallow. "So, I'm not welcome." He met my eyes finally, and said, clear as crystal, "No, Mom. You're not. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember walking to my car. I only remember the sound of the door closing behind me. Not a slam. A quiet click, as if they were sealing me out of their perfect little world." I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel. My hands trembled. My ears rang. For a moment I thought of just driving until the road ended, driving until the pain dissolved into the horizon. But then something else rose inside me. Not weakness, not despair. Clarity. I whispered to the dark windshield, "You want me gone? Fine, I'll vanish. But not the way you think that night as snow drifted against. My windows." I pulled out the shoebox again. The papers, the proof, the keys. I laid them across the table, and with every document I touched, the betrayal burned less, and the resolve burned more. Because Ethan thought betrayal ended with me excluded from Christmas. But what he didn't know was that betrayal was only the beginning. Revenge had just woken up. The night Ethan told me I wasn't welcome, I thought the worst had passed. But betrayal has layers. Like peeling an onion, each one stings worse than the last. The following morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Mara. "Thanks for understanding last night. It was hard, but necessary. We'll make sure the kids still feel your love in other ways. Please send the winter camp tuition by Friday so there's no disruption." I stared at the glowing screen. My throat tightened. Not welcome at Christmas, but still welcome to pay. That was when I realized it wasn't just about boundaries, it was about control. They didn't want me as family. They wanted me as funding. I didn't reply. I set the phone down, poured myself coffee, and let the silence press against me. Later that week, I saw Mara at the grocery store. Her cart was full of expensive wines, imported cheeses, gift baskets. She spotted me, forced a smile, and approached. "Hi," she said, as if nothing had happened. "I was going to text you. We're hosting my parents on Christmas Eve." "It's going to be wonderful. Wonderful," I repeated, my voice flat. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Look, don't take this personally. It's about balance. Ethan has to prioritize his nuclear family now. Nuclear family. As if I were some distant relative, a stranger, not the woman who raised him alone." She touched my arm, condescending. "You'll still see the kids. Just less. It's healthier. There it was again. That word they used like a weapon." I pulled back. "Enjoy your perfect holiday," I said, and walked away, leaving her frozen in the aisle, her cart like a throne she thought she deserved. The humiliation didn't stop there. At church the following Sunday, a neighbor approached me after service. "I heard Ethan and Mara are doing a kid-free Christmas this year," she chirped. "That must be nice for you? Less work, kid-free." That's the story they were telling? That I wasn't excluded, but that the children wouldn't be around anyone at all. I forced a smile. "Yes," I said quietly. "Nice." But inside I was boiling. That night I pulled out the storage box from Lakeview, the one with old records, proof of everything I had done. I flipped through receipts, $20,000 wired for the down payment, tuition checks for private school, emergency transfers during Ethan's job loss, utility bills I'd paid when they were tight on cash. Every page screamed the same truth. I was never just support. I was survival. And now they dared to erase me. The final straw came a week before Christmas. I stopped by the duplex on Morse Avenue, where Ethan rented the garage. I needed to post some notices for other tenants. As I approached, I overheard voices from inside. Ethan's, Mara's. "She'll be fine," Mara was saying. "Your mom's too soft to push back. She'll keep paying, and without her hovering, the kids will finally have some peace." "Yeah," Ethan sighed. "I just feel a little guilty." "Don't," Mara snapped. "She's had a time." Now it's ours silence. Then Ethan's voice, quieter. "What if she pulls back the money?" Mara laughed, sharp, cold. "She won't. She lives through you. If she stopped, she'd have nothing left." I froze outside the garage door. My heart pounded. Nothing left. That's what they thought of me. That without them, without giving, I was nothing. I turned, walked back to my car, hands shaking, but not from weakness anymore, from certainty. That night I sat at my kitchen table, lit a single candle, and opened the folder Linda had prepared with me. The tabs gleamed like weapons waiting to be drawn. "Morse Avenue," I whispered. "Education Trust, power of appointment." I touched each one in turn. My tears had dried. My fear had burned out. All that remained was resolve. They thought I had nothing left, but they had no idea how much I still held. For the first time in years, I slept deeply. Not because I was at peace, but because my war had finally begun. Revenge doesn't begin with shouting. It begins with silence, with the turning of papers, with signatures no one expects you to hold. The morning after I overheard Ethan and Mara in the garage, I called Linda. "It's time," I told her. Her voice was calm, steady. "Then we do it step by step. Paper first, keys later." She arrived with her leather folder, her notary stamp, and her unshakable faith in me. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Ethan had eaten bowls of cereal before school, the same table where I had stitched holes in his jeans late at night. Now it became my war room. First, Morse Avenue duplex. I owned it outright. Ethan had signed a lease for the garage space 6 months ago, but he was behind 2 months on rent. He thought I'd never check. He thought a mother wouldn't dare treat her son like any other tenant. Linda slid the form across the table. Notice of default. 7 days to pay, 14 to vacate. My pen didn't tremble as I signed. "Do you feel cruel?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "I feel awake." Second, education trust for the children. For years, I had quietly paid into an account for Luca and his little sister, Ella. Every field trip, every enrichment class, every summer camp. My money. Ethan and Mara treated it like a faucet that would never run dry. Now I was tightening the tap. The amendment was clear. Funds would only be released if I was included in the children's major. Events, school showcases, performances, holidays. No presents, no payment. I initialed each page. "If they want my love invisible," I murmured, "they can live without its benefits too." Third, power of appointment. When I created the family trust with my mother's inheritance, I had built in a clause. If I was ostracized, demeaned, or excluded, I had the right to redirect all assets to other beneficiaries. At the time, it felt symbolic. Insurance against the unthinkable. Now it was my sword. I signed the restatement, clarifying the terms. "Excluded from family traditions," I read aloud. "That seems clear enough." Linda stamped it. Ironclad. By noon the papers were done. My hands smelled faintly of ink. My shoulders ached. But in that ache was a strange relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't just giving. I was choosing. That evening, Mara texted again. "Hi, just checking. You'll transfer tuition tomorrow, right?" Luca doesn't want to miss robotics camp. "Thanks." I typed back slowly. "Yes, please send me the schedule. I'll attend the final showcase." Minutes later, the 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Finally, a curt reply. "I'll ask." "It's very crowded," I smiled, because that wasn't a no. It was fear, dressed as hesitation. The next day, I delivered the notice to the garage unit, slipped it under the door. The paper slid like a blade across wood. My hand didn't shake. That evening, Ethan called. "Mom?" His voice was tight. "I got a letter at the garage." "Is this some kind of mistake?" "No," I said. "You're behind on rent." "You're treating me like a tenant?" He demanded. "You signed a lease," I replied. "That makes you a tenant." Silence. Then angry disbelief. "You'd really do this to your own son?" I closed my eyes. "You already did this, Ethan." "I'm just signing my part." He cursed under his breath, then hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time. My hands were steady. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to Ethan, not to Mara, to my grandchildren. I told them about the nights I worked when I should have slept, the meals I skipped so Ethan could eat, the money I set aside for their futures. I told them I loved them more than life itself, and that love wasn't about gifts or tuition. It was about presence, about showing up. I sealed the letter, placed it in the Lakeview storage unit with the rest of my records. "Someday," I whispered, "they'll know the truth. Revenge isn't loud. It's careful. It's patient. It's the moment you stop begging for a seat at the table and start building your own. And piece by piece, page by page, I was building mine. The first rule of revenge is simple. Don't shout. Don't warn. Just tighten the web until they realize they can't move." The morning after Ethan's angry phone call, I received another message, this time from Mara. "We're concerned. Ethan feels hurt. Maybe you should reconsider the notice. Family shouldn't treat each other this way." I stared at the words. Family shouldn't treat each other this way. And yet, hadn't they treated me worse? Exiled me from Christmas, erased my sacrifices, reduced me to a wallet with legs? I didn't reply. Silence was my answer. 2 days later, Ethan appeared at my doorstep. No warning, no text, just a sharp knock on the door. When I opened it, he stood there, face tight with anger. "Mum, we need to talk." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He paced my living room like a caged animal. "Why are you doing this?" "Serving me notices, threatening funds. This isn't you." I sat calmly in my chair. Maybe this is the real me, the one who remembers what she owns. His jaw clenched. "You're supposed to support your son. Not sabotage him. Support." I repeated, my voice quiet but sharp. "I've supported you since the day you were born." "Do you want me to list the years of support, or the dollar amounts?" He froze. For the first time, his anger faltered. I leaned forward. "You want to call me cruel? Fine. But don't forget who kept your lights on, who paid your mortgage, who built the very ground you walk on." His shoulders sagged, just a little. "Mom." But then his phone buzzed. A message from Mara lit up the screen. He read it quickly, his face hardening again. "She thinks you're overreacting. She says maybe you're unstable." Unstable. The word cut deeper than any knife. I straightened. "Tell Mara this," I said coldly. "Unstable women don't build trusts. They don't own duplexes. They don't hold receipts. They don't have folders stamped and signed by lawyers. I am more stable than either of you will ever be." Ethan swallowed, but he didn't argue. He left without another word, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. That evening, I made another call, this time to my lawyer. "I want to update my will," I said. He sounded surprised. "Anything urgent?" "Yes," I said. "Very urgent." We scheduled a meeting for the next morning. At the lawyer's office, I laid out everything. The trust, the assets, the contingencies. "I want it clear," I told him. "If I am excluded, demeaned, or erased from my role as mother and grandmother, Ethan and Mara will not inherit a cent. Everything will go to my grandchildren directly, or to charity, if necessary." The lawyer raised his brows, but he didn't question me. He drafted the amendments, and I signed them with a steady hand. When the ink dried, I felt something shift inside me. Not bitterness, not spite, power. For years I had been a background character in Ethan and Mara's story. Now I was writing my own. That night, Linda came over. I showed her the papers. She nodded, proud. "You've done it," she said. "You've built your wall." "Now they'll have to face it," I exhaled. "Do you think I'm heartless?" "No," she said firmly. "You're a mother who finally stopped bleeding for people who don't value your blood." A week later, Christmas lights glowed all over town. I passed houses filled with laughter, families gathered around trees. My own house was quiet, but not empty. It was filled with something new. Resolve. Then a photo popped up on social media. Mara had posted it. Her whole family gathered around a glittering tree. Ethan smiling. The children in matching pajamas. Mara herself, glass of wine in hand, captioned, "Family is everything. Blessed this Christmas family is everything." And yet I was nowhere in that picture. I stared at the glowing screen until my hands stopped shaking. Then I whispered to myself, "Let them play pretend. Soon everyone will know the truth, because this wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice, and justice was coming." Christmas Day came cold and sharp. The streets were empty, everyone tucked inside with family, fire, and feasts. Everyone but me. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the snow fall. For the first time in my life, I wasn't with my son on Christmas. But instead of tears, I felt something else. Anticipation. Because I knew the cracks were already spreading. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A neighbor from Morse Avenue, the duplex street. "Hi, are you aware your garage tenant left a mess outside? Boxes, trash, some strange files?" "Yes," I said evenly. "Thank you." I'll deal with it. I drove there, boots crunching over snow. Sure enough, in front of Ethan's garage unit, there were boxes stacked carelessly. Wrapping paper, tools, and one black binder marked Expenses Q4. I picked it up, flipped it open. My jaw tightened. Inside were receipts, extravagant purchases, electronics, luxury items, paid for with funds from the education trust. The very account meant for my grandchildren's future. So that was it. Mara and Ethan had been siphoning money, turning my sacrifices into toys and appearances. My hand trembled, not with weakness but with fury. I snapped photos of every page, then locked the binder in my trunk. The next day, Ethan called. "Mum, I heard from the property manager." "You went through my garage?" "It's not your garage," I said evenly. "It's mine." "You're a tenant. Mum, please," he begged now, tone shifting. "Mara doesn't know about some of the things. If she finds out, she'll find out." I cut him off. "They all will." He went silent. Then his voice dropped, bitter and sharp. "You'll regret this. You're tearing this family apart." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "No, Ethan. You did that when you told me I wasn't welcome." And I hung up. That night, I drafted letters. Copies of the receipts, copies of the trust amendments, copies of the notices. I sealed them in envelopes marked for delivery, to Ethan, to Mara, and to Mara's parents. Because, if they wanted a confrontation, they were about to get one. New Year's Eve. Mara invited me to dinner. The message was clipped, formal. "We should talk. Ethan wants peace. Join us. Linda warned me not to go." "They'll try to corner you," she said. "I know," I replied, "but it's time." When I arrived, the table was set like always, polished, curated, picture perfect. Mara smiled tightly, gestured to the empty chair. Ethan sat stiff, eyes darting between us. The children were upstairs. "Mum," he began, "we need to clear the air." I laid my envelope on the table. "We do." Mara frowned. "What's that?" "Proof," I said, "of where my money went, of how the trust has been abused, of what you've been hiding from your own parents." Their faces drained of color. Ethan reached for the envelope. I didn't let go. "You told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas," I continued, voice calm. "But you were happy to take my money, to spend it on yourselves while telling me I was unstable, intrusive, unnecessary." "Mom, please," Ethan stammered. "No," I snapped, and my voice echoed in their perfect dining room. "You don't get to silence me anymore." I slid copies across the table to each of them. Mara opened hers, eyes scanning the pages. Her lips parted, face pale. How did you—" "I kept everything," I said simply. "Every receipt, every wire, every transfer. You thought I was just a weak woman who would keep giving. But I was watching. And now everyone will know," Mara's voice cracked. "You can't— This will ruin us." I leaned back, eyes steady. "You ruined yourselves the moment you forgot who raised the ground you stand on." Ethan's shoulders slumped, his face hollow. For once he had no words. I rose. "This is not a request. This is a reckoning. Either things change now or these letters go public. To your friends, to your neighbors, to Mara's family, to anyone who believes your perfect little story." The room went silent, except for the ticking of the clock. Then I walked out, leaving them frozen at their curated table, their lies unraveling around them. The confrontation at the dinner table rattled them. I could see it in their eyes when I left. The first flicker of fear. But fear in private wasn't enough. They had paraded me as a burden in front of friends, neighbors, and Mara's family. Justice demanded that their mask slip in front of the same audience. And fate handed me the stage. 2 weeks later, Luca's robotics camp had its final showcase. I arrived early, program in hand, sitting quietly in the second row. Parents filled the seats around me, excited chatter bouncing off the walls. Mara walked in with Ethan and her parents. She saw me and stiffened. Ethan muttered something to her, but they didn't approach. They couldn't. Not with eyes everywhere. When Luca's group was announced, he bounded onto the stage, beaming. His little robot whirred across the floor, lights blinking. "My Nana helped pay for my camp!" he shouted proudly. The room chuckled warmly. My eyes filled, but not with shame, with vindication. Mara's face burned red. She tried to hush him, but it was too late. The words were out. Everyone heard them. After the event, parents gathered, congratulating each other. One of Mara's acquaintances leaned toward me. "You're his grandmother?" "He couldn't stop talking about you. Said you always help." Mara forced a smile, tried to laugh it off. "Oh, you know kids." They exaggerate, but Ethan's silence betrayed him. His eyes flicked toward me, resentful but trapped. The whispers started that night, small ripples in their perfect pond. Maybe it wasn't Ethan's bonus. Maybe it was his mother all along. And once whispers begin, they don't stop. They grow. They spread. It didn't take long for the letters I left on the dinner table to work their poison. Mara's parents called me first. "Is this true?" her father demanded, voice clipped. "You funded the down payment?" "The trust. The tuition?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Every word is documented." Silence on the line. Then quietly, "We'll speak to them." And they did. Within days, their family dinners turned sour. Mara's polished image cracked under her parents' disappointment. Ethan, caught between lies and proof, began shrinking like a man half his size. Then came the neighborhood barbecue. I hadn't planned to go, but when an old friend insisted, I went, head high. When I arrived, people were already talking. I heard fragments as I passed. Heard she paid for everything. Can you imagine lying about that? And then excluding her at Christmas? I didn't need to say a word. My silence was enough. Mara tried to laugh louder, to talk brighter, to clutch Ethan's arm tighter. But her eyes kept darting around, panicked. Ethan barely spoke at all. Finally, someone asked, too loudly to ignore, "Ethan, is it true your mother paid for your house?" The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone stared. Ethan's face crumpled. "She helped," he muttered. "She didn't help." I corrected softly, my voice cutting through the air. "She carried." Gasps, murmurs, heads turning. Mara's hand slipped from Ethan's arm. And in that moment, justice wasn't in the papers or the notices. It was in the truth, laid bare in front of everyone they'd tried so hard to impress. Their perfect image shattered. And I stood taller than I had in years. After the barbecue, nothing was the same for Ethan and Mara. The whispers became stories. The stories became truths. Mara's parents pulled back their support. They stopped boasting about their daughter's perfect family. Instead, they looked at me with quiet regret, a silent apology in their eyes. Ethan avoided me. Weeks passed without a call, a text, a knock on my door. But silence can't erase shame. It only feeds it. One evening, a letter came, folded clumsily, handwritten. From Ethan. "Mum, I don't know what to say. Mara is furious. She says you've ruined us. But deep down, I know I did this. I let her push me. I let myself believe lies, and I hurt you in the process. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't know how to fix it." I read it twice. My eyes blurred. For years I had begged for scraps of acknowledgement. Now, finally, it came. Not from pride, not from performance, but from truth. I didn't reply. Not yet. Some wounds need silence before they need answers. A week later, I saw Mara at the grocery store again. But this time, her cart wasn't filled with wine and luxury. It was bread, canned beans, marked down produce. She avoided my eyes. Her perfect mask was gone. I walked past her. For once, I didn't feel small. I felt free. That night, I sat with Linda at my kitchen table, the same table where it all began. "You did it," she said. "You got justice." I exhaled. I didn't just get justice. I got myself back. Spring came. Snow melted, flowers bloomed, life moved on. But inside me, something had shifted forever. I wasn't the same woman who sat in her car that December night, trembling because her son said she wasn't welcome. That woman was gone. In her place was someone sharper, steadier, unafraid of being alone. One Sunday, Luca and Ella came running up my driveway, arms full of drawings. "Nana!" they shouted. "We missed you!" I knelt, gathering them close. Their warmth, their laughter, it was the only inheritance I needed. Behind them, Ethan stood awkwardly. His eyes were tired, his shoulders bent. He looked at me the way a boy looks at a mother when he realizes the world is too heavy to carry alone. "I'm sorry," he whispered. For a moment, I wanted to reach out, to pull him close, to say the words he longed to hear. But then I remembered Christmas, the door closing in my face, the word unwelcome. I met his eyes. "I hope you've learned," I said quietly. And then I turned back to the children, letting my love rest where it was safest. With them. That night, as the house grew quiet, I reflected. Real family isn't the ones who smile in photos. Real family isn't the ones who boast at barbecues. Real family is the ones who show up, who remember, who stand beside you when the world tries to erase you. Ethan tried to bury me in silence, but I rose in truth, and as I blew out the last candle, I whispered to myself, sometimes revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about reminding them who you are and never letting them forget again